Since Barry Goldwater ran for president in 1964, more and more people in America have been getting behind conservative ideas. They started questioning how much power the federal government should have. They thought states, businesses, and regular folks should have more freedom from the federal government's control. A lot of Americans didn't like how much money was being spent on entitlement programs, which are programs that guarantee certain benefits to specific groups of people. By 1980, the government was shelling out nearly $300 billion every year on these programs, and many taxpayers weren't happy about it. Some folks also got frustrated with the government's civil rights policies. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was supposed to put an end to racial discrimination, but as time went on, some court decisions expanded on it. Some people didn't like laws that gave minorities more opportunities. In the 1970s, grassroots groups on the right side of the political spectrum started popping up, and together they were called the New Right. They were against things like abortion, school busing, the Equal Rights Amendment, and they wanted to bring back school prayer. A lot of people in the New Right didn't like affirmative action either. This policy made employers give special consideration to women, African Americans, and other minority groups. The New Right called it reverse discrimination because they thought it unfairly favored certain groups based on race or gender, even if they weren't necessarily more qualified. These right-wing groups tended to vote for the same candidates, and they formed what's known as the Conservative Coalition. It was made up of smart folks, business leaders, regular people, Democrats who felt let down, and Christian groups who believed in the Bible. The National Review, started by a conservative guy named William F. Buckley Jr. in 1955, was all about promoting conservative ideas. Members of the Conservative Coalition all shared similar views. They didn't like big government, entitlement programs, or a lot of civil rights programs. They also believed in going back to old-fashioned moral standards. Religious groups, especially evangelical Christians, played a big part in the Conservative Coalition. Some of them followed TV preachers like Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson. Falwell started a group called the Moral Majority, which took the Bible super seriously and believed in strict right and wrong rules. They criticized what they saw as a decline in moral values across the country. The conservatives found a strong guy to run for president, Ronald Reagan. He got the nomination in 1980 and picked George Bush to be his sidekick. Before politics, Reagan was actually an actor in movies, but he got into politics after giving a famous speech for Barry Goldwater in 1964. Then, in 1966, he became governor of California, and people liked him so much that he got reelected in 1970. During the 1980 election, Reagan talked about a bunch of stuff that upset conservative voters, like court decisions about abortion, dirty movies, teaching evolution, and praying in school. He also didn't like communism and promised to fix the high prices and the mess with hostages in Iran. Reagan was really good at talking to people, partly because he used to act. They called him the Great Communicator because he made things easy to understand. He also cared a lot about making the country strong, both with the military and money. In a debate with Jimmy Carter, Reagan criticized how Carter dealt with energy problems and terrorists. Carter said Reagan was too old-fashioned for America and warned about cutting social programs. In 1980, just over half of Americans voted, and Reagan won by a little bit. His win also gave control of the Senate to the Republicans. By 1984, Reagan had a lot of people on his side who liked what he was doing. These supporters were mainly conservative folks, like business owners, people from the South and the West, and even some Democrats who liked Reagan's ideas. Plus, the economy was doing really well. With all this backing, Reagan easily won the 1984 election, beating Democrat Walter Mondale. Mondale chose Geraldine Ferraro from New York to run with him, making her the first woman on a big party's ticket. In 1988, Reagan's vice president, George Bush, decided to run for president. He got the Republican nomination, and the Democrats picked Michael Dukakis, who was the governor of Massachusetts. During the campaign, Bush promised to keep taxes low, saying, Read my lips, no new taxes. Most people felt pretty good about things and didn't see a need for big changes. They felt like they were doing well financially because of Reagan and Bush. George Bush ended up winning the election with 53% of the votes and 426 electoral votes.